Well, welcome to this Tree Week edition. It's Tree Week and we're celebrating in our forestry tree style, and we're going to have trees, and more trees about our show today.
Awesome. Yeah, it is a great week to celebrate trees. You know, we partnered with the Urban Forestry Initiative here out of the University of Kentucky, and some of our team members are heavily involved with that group, and we're celebrating Tree Week all week, and this is a special Tree Week celebration on FromTheWoodsToday.com. So thank you all for being with us today. If you're joining us via Facebook Live, we're glad to have you with us. And if you're on Zoom, thank you as well. You can interact with us via the chat pod, put in questions there if you have questions. And if you're on Facebook Live, put in comments on the comment section and we'll respond to those too. So yeah, Renee, I'm really excited about today's show.
Yeah, and if you're joining us for the first time, I'll introduce myself. I'm Renee Williams, and I work in the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. My co-host there is Billy Thomas. He also works in the department. And like I said, today is Tree Week, and we've got a jam-packed show for you. So let's go ahead and get started, Billy.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think we're going to have Dr. Ellen Crocker on to talk a little bit about what we're doing for Tree Week.
Wonderful. Well, I am delighted to be here and delighted to share Tree Week with all of you. So if you aren't familiar with Tree Week or what we're doing for Tree Week, we've got a whole series of great webinars that are happening. Tree Week is something that I believe this is the third year, and it's something that the Urban Forest Initiative here in Lexington, Kentucky developed to kind of celebrate trees and recognize them each year. So a week full of trees. And every week is Tree Week for us, but this is a special week, I think, where we get to raise awareness about the many different ways that trees impact us and our environment. So here with the Forestry and Natural Resources Extension Group, we've got different webinars every day about trees. So we already had one on identifying Kentucky's trees, one on forest health, and one on common landscape trees. And if you missed them, let us know and we can get those to you. But we have Trees for Birds coming up tomorrow with Dr. Matt Springer. And then we've got Trees and Wildlife Assistance in Kentucky coming up on Friday with Billy Thomas. So you don't want to miss those because that's a fantastic opportunity. And then I really encourage you that if you haven't checked it out already, you visit the Tree Week website, and here it is, and you can scroll down and see on any given day all of the great events that are happening related to trees. So some of those are in person, of course, here in the Lexington or Central Kentucky area, but several of them are virtual, like our webinars. You can attend those from anywhere. So check that out and see if there are any that are of interest to you, and definitely enjoy Tree Week.
Yeah.
So we've got a special segment for you today in honor of Tree Week. Myself and Josh Kite, who's an Extension Associate of Nursery Crops in the Department of Horticulture here at UK. And we know it's Tree Week, and we know that you might be thinking about planting a tree this week. So we wanted to give you some tips on how to pick the right tree for your yard, how to pick the right tree in the nursery, and how to get it in the ground.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about this segment because I think we do have questions a lot of times. It's like, how do I know what tree to do and plant, and where do I get it, and all that kind of stuff. So you're giving a lot of helpful tips for this that'll be useful not only today, but down the road.
Yeah. So you all want to go ahead and see the video on picking your perfect tree?
Yeah, right. Join us. We had a lot of fun out shopping for trees. So come along with us.
All right. I'm going to stop my video and mic, and then I'll share that.
Okay.
It's Tree Week, and hopefully you and your family are going to plant a tree this week in celebration of that. And we wanted to give you some tips on how to do that successfully. How to select a tree that you're going to be happy with, that's going to be happy in the site you pick, and how to pick the best tree when you're shopping, and how to actually get it in the ground. So today I'm here with Josh Kite. He's an Extension Associate in the Department of Horticulture at the University of Kentucky, and he specializes in nursery crops, which is great for where we are today.
All right, so we're here at Springhouse Gardens. It's one of the premier retail garden centers here in central Kentucky, and they have a very, very wide selection of trees. They have everything from native shade trees to ornamental trees to a great native selection and other ornamentals to plant in your yard.
When you're shopping for a tree, there are a lot of different options. There are different options in terms of what type of tree you could get. You could get a balled and burlap tree that's going to be wrapped and typically larger, heavier, but maybe give you a more permanent, established tree look right away. You could get a container grown tree that's going to be easier to move around, but also likely to have some roots that are circling inside that container that you'll want to prune before putting it into the ground. Or you could get a bare root seedling. Now those trees aren't going to come with a lot of soil, so those roots are really susceptible to drying out, and you've got to be careful to keep them moist before you plant them. But those are great trees and typically have really good root systems, so likely to thrive once they're in the ground. There's no right choice, just different options depending on what's available to you and what you want.
This is a ball and burlap tree. This tree was not grown here, so this was brought in from a nursery, hopefully here in Kentucky. So what you're seeing here is in the field, this tree is grown in soil. And so they come and harvest it with a piece of machinery called a tree spade. On the outside of it, you're gonna see a wire basket, you're gonna see burlap, and you're gonna see this string. So basically when it comes out of the ground, they're gonna already have a basket that's set there, and they're gonna have burlap setting in the basket. They're gonna take the tree spade with the tree in it after it's dug, they're gonna lower the tree down into the basket. And then the reason we're seeing some breakdown here, first off, this is what it's supposed to do. The burlap is supposed to break down, and since they're using an organic manila twine, that's supposed to break down as well. So basically, after you pick this up from here, if you were to purchase it, you're gonna take this to your house, and before you plant the tree, you're gonna, remove the rope out from around it, cut some of the burlap off from around the top, and then you're gonna wanna expose it and get it down to the buttress or the root flare. And then you're gonna wanna, there's a couple tricks that you can do to remove the wire out from around it. If your root ball is moist and it's falling apart, or if it's too dry and it's falling apart, you can leave the basket on it, but you're gonna wanna remove as much of the basket as possible, especially when you're rolling it in the hole. One of the easy ways that I like to do it is you lay the tree over on its side. You're gonna see on the bottom of a basket, there's gonna be some rungs that you can cut out. Remove all the rungs at the bottom, put it into a hole, and then take your bolt cutters and cut down the side of the basket. Then you can remove it and then backfill as needed to plant your tree correctly. This tree is what you call a container tree. It's a little bit easy, I'm not gonna say a little bit, it's a lot easier to handle than your ball and burlap tree. Not everybody wants to tackle a 2-inch, 2.5-inch, 3-inch ball and burlap tree. You've got your container tree, it's grown in a substrate, which means that it doesn't have any native soil with it. You're gonna take it home, you're gonna dig your hole, then you're gonna lay it on the side, and you're gonna take a razor blade knife and you're gonna cut down the side of the pot and expose the root system. First thing you're gonna do is you're gonna look at the root system, and it's gonna be making a bunch of circles around that. What you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna take a sharp knife and you're gonna wanna cut down each side about 4 times and expose those roots and rough them up, and then you're gonna wanna plant it, then you can put it in your hole at the proper planting depth.
There are so many different choices for great species, and it depends on what you want. You need to match what you're looking for in terms of your goals. Do you want beautiful fall leaf color? Do you want a big shade tree? Maybe do you have power lines overhead and you need something that's going to stay a little bit smaller? There's no one right tree, but there are good trees for your site and trees that are not such good selections. So keeping that in mind when you're shopping will make you happier with the final outcome.
This tree that we're looking at right here is a Quercus macrocarpa, or otherwise a bur oak. You can't get any more Kentucky than this. These are the big trees that you see out in the majestic trees that you see out in the middle of horse farms and big paddocks. So we were walking through the nursery, and this is one of the ones that I wanted to, it's a tulip poplar, Liriodendron tulipifera for the scientific name. And this one we just stopped and looked at because it actually has very, very good form for it. As you're going up, you're noticing that the branches have great spacing, there's no cross branching, and it has a really, really, really nice straight leader. So this is the kind of stuff that you're looking for in purchasing a great tree. Not to say anything about Lowe's or Home Depot. It's like, yeah, you can go there and you can get trees that look really, really nice, but a lot of them, since they're just looking at price point and price point only, they're gonna go with the cheapest plant all the time. So you may not get a tree that's had the time and effort put into it to make it look nice and straight, and to make sure that it doesn't have crossing branches. You could have something that could look like a darn Z or a curlicue or something like that, because people are only going to put the amount of money into a tree when they're growing it that they're getting paid for it. So this tree, while it is expensive, you're getting a great product compared to something that might be a little bit cheaper but might have some more problems. All right, so here we're showing a different type of tree. This is a river birch. We always talk about the right tree in the right place. This is a great tree. It's a fast growing tree, but you don't want to plant it right next to your house. You want to plant it about 15 feet out from your house. You see all around Lexington and all kinds of places where people will plant this right next to their house. This thing's fast growing, has an aggressive root system. If you plant it too close, it's going to get in your foundation. It's going to cause all kinds of problems. Right, so here we have a Kentucky coffee tree. You know, we've been talking about form, trying to find a straight leader and all that kind of stuff. I will tell you that you can find a Kentucky coffee tree with a straight leader and nice branching and all that kind of stuff, but it's really difficult. These are one of the harder trees to grow straight in the nursery because they want to do what they want to do. You can stake them and train them and try to prune for a leader, but all these specimens that we have here are all acceptable trees that you would want to plant on your landscape, in the landscape of a Kentucky coffee tree. You're not going to notice this when this tree gets to its true potential. It'll still be doing what it wants, but it's going to look like a true Kentucky coffee tree. This is a great street tree. It's tolerant of a lot of stuff, a lot of different sites. Pretty much this tree will grow anywhere. I think I could even keep this alive. I'm not known for having a green thumb, but I'm pretty sure I could keep a Kentucky coffee tree alive. All right, so we've been talking about balled and burlap trees, container trees, bare root trees, native trees. We've been talking about large shade trees. Well, we've talked about earlier about the right tree in the right spot, and we've yet to talk about a small tree. Well, we have one here for you. This is a sweet bay magnolia. It's gonna have a really nice fragrant flower, semi-evergreen, and it's only going to get about 25 foot tall. So if you have a small place that you want to plant one in, like a patio, you can fit that in there. If you want to put something under, if you got some power lines, you're worried about it getting power lines, you can use this. It makes a great accent plant when you get it in a multi-trunk form. And we also, you see it mostly in the multi-trunk form, and you see it planted on like the corner of houses, around patios. But another thing, this thing can make a nice ornamental small shade tree as well, if you get it what's available in the single trunk form, which we have here. Now this is a beautiful tree. You can let it go crazy and let it go all natural, or you can trim it up into its ornamental form.
So this is one of my personal favorite smaller trees, and that's the pawpaw. It's a native tree, and I like it because it makes delicious fruit, especially some of these cultivars like they're selling here. The other nice thing about it is that it's not going to grow too tall. So if you've got a space that you really can't grow that high into, it's going to stay a smaller tree. And there really are some great smaller trees for those areas.
All right, so we're back to small trees again. Flowering ornamentals was considered an understory tree or an edge of the woods tree would be your flowering dogwood. Some people, you see it all the time, they plant them in direct sunlight with no shade, and they seem to be thriving well. I don't understand how that works, but I guess some of them do better in direct sunlight than others. But if you had a nice mature trees, like some, I don't know, some nice tall oaks, something you could fit this under, this would make a great addition to your landscape, especially if you, like I said, you already have some mature trees and you want to come in and put some color in early spring and then a nice tree after that. You could put in your red buds or your flowering dogwoods. All right, so here we've been talking about ball and burlap trees. We've been talking about container trees. This is kind of a container tree too, but I don't know. This is what you would consider maybe a liner tree or something that could possibly be planted bare root. Not everybody wants to handle a big tree. These trees have their place too. It's like Ellen said, or like Ellen has said before, is that, you know, there's no right answer. Now, if you do want to buy a smaller tree, you're going to have to put some work into it to make it a nice specimen. You're going to have to work on the leader yourself, and you're going to have to prune for structure on your tree. Whereas if you buy a bigger tree, you know, the nurseries put a lot of work into it. What we have here is a straight species white oak, and I will let you know this is a Kentucky proud tree. It was grown by a nursery that was over in Paris that is sold to Springhouse Gardens, available for people to come and plant in their yard.
So thanks for joining us today. We had fun. I hope you had fun too. Make sure you visit your independently owned retail garden center this week, buy a tree and plant it and enjoy it for years to come. If you want to learn more, make sure to check out the website, and hope to hear from you if you have any questions.
Well, thank you all so much for that. I love that video. It was really very interesting. And Josh is on here too. If he wants to go ahead and start his video, he can. I'm sure we'll have some questions that'll pop up. But first of all, Ellen, I wanted to ask you and Josh, is that where can people buy these trees? And another question is, like, I'm buying a container tree that's, 2 foot tall. How do I know it's not going to get 100 foot tall and, get in my power lines or whatever? It's like, it's small when I bought it. So how do I know what to do at that point?
Well, that's when you're going to really want to know what tree species and the area that you're going to plant. I mean, obviously, your oaks are going to get taller. So that's when it's proper to do your research to find out what you want in your space and what kind of tree you want to plant in that space. There's good resources out there. I mean, Wikipedia is a great one, but also the Missouri Botanical Garden webpage, I believe it is, has very good information about tree species and sizes that they get. And then a lot of the stuff that's on the tags that are available from going to your independently owned retail garden centers will tell you the sizes that the trees is going to get and their true potential.
Mm-hmm. And if you're trying to figure out the best tree for your site, I'd say definitely think about what the tree is going to be 10 years down the road, not right now. And that's tough because you want the tree that fills the space right now, but it's going to grow. And you'll be very disappointed if you plant a large tree in a space that can't accommodate it, under the power lines. That space really does need to be clear for safety reasons. And so, pick a different spot for that tree, or pick a different tree for that spot. And the Kentucky Association of Arborists has a great resource. They list all the different trees and give them a rating for our area, kind of a percentage rating for how well is it going to do there. And that's another thing to keep in mind, because you might love the look of, let's say, a Colorado blue spruce, but it's not going to thrive in your site. So picking something that's not only a good fit for your site, but that site's going to be a good fit for it. And something else that I want to throw out there that Josh mentioned in the video is that you can buy trees a lot of places. You can buy them cheaply from, anywhere, but it's an investment. And you're thinking about something that's going to live a long time. Some of these trees are going to live much longer than us. So putting in a little bit more money on the front end might be worth it. And that comes when we're talking about form, it comes when we're talking about species. I'm also a big fan of buying small trees, buying those seedlings, those bare root seedlings or small trees, because their root system is likely to be more intact, but that's going to be more work on your end to get that tree's form where you want it to be. So there's trade-offs there. There's no one right solution, but just think about yourself, what you're interested in. Do you want to spend that time paying attention to the form, or do you want to pay a great nursery to do that for you? And how big of a tree do you want? Some of these bulb and burlap trees are heavy. And if you don't have equipment for that, you might prefer a smaller tree, a container grown tree, or a bare root tree.
Yeah, I was going to say, Josh, not everybody has a big old spade like your background picture there to work with. So. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like Ellen alluded to, there's a lot of, you pay for a tree. There's a lot of things that people don't realize that go in on the front side of things from a nursery, from taking something from a bare root liner. The turnaround, a 2-inch tree, the turnaround time in a nursery is 3 to 7 years, depending on what you're growing that tree. And during that time, they're pruning for it, they're spraying weeds, they're treating it for pests and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of these trees want to go crazy, kind of like a Kentucky coffee tree. And you have to straighten those liners up. I mean, I guess landscaping and pruning the way an arborist does things aren't always the way that a nursery does things. Nursery does things kind of crazy. They're not afraid to go in and modify a leader or shorten a leader to make sure to ensure that perfect tree that everybody wants in their landscape.
And another thing, a retail location that will not be named, I was just visiting earlier, and they had discount trees, super cheap, whole pile of them, Bradford or Calorie pear. Now that's an example to me of you'd be better off saving your money and planting something else for sure, for a number of reasons. So Bradford pear is on my no plant list for the fact that it's just not a great tree. There are better kind of smaller trees that you can get that have beautiful spring flowers than Bradford pear, because Bradford pear, first, the flowers stink, which is no good. Second, that tree falls apart. It has terrible form. Those branches are kind of all shoved together, and if you have an ice storm or as the tree ages, it's going to drop those branches and look unsightly, be a hazard, not be very long-lived. But then third, those seeds that it produces are not sterile, and birds will eat them and spread them, and they will take over in our natural areas. So I think that's an example of, yeah, you could buy that Bradford pear for really cheap, but you'd be so much better served to buy one of our native tree species that has beautiful spring flowers and is going to be long-lived and is going to be a great addition to your yard, as well as not hurting our natural areas.
So if we don't buy them from the places that shall not be named, where is a list of places that we should buy them from?
Well, I guess the biggest thing you want to do is you always want to support your independently owned retail garden centers. We have, fortunately for us here in Fayette County and in Woodford County, we have a bunch of them in this area. The horticulture department, as in me and one other person, are working on putting together a list for the state, like an interactive map of where the independently retail garden centers are. But the biggest thing you can do, just go to Google, garden centers and see what comes up, and it should give you a great list. I like going to the independent retail garden centers because you're going to get a good tree and it's had a lot of time in it, as I talked about on the video, versus going to one of those box stores.
Josh, I was going to say another resource might be our local county extension agents out there across the state. They may be familiar with some of those local nurseries in their communities or nearby. So, if you're having any trouble finding one, maybe reach out to your local county extension agent. They might be able to help you as well.
Yep.
And there's lots of advantages to using those local nurseries and retailers. If you get a tree that's grown in Kentucky, or at least nearby, you know it's going to do well in Kentucky. Versus if you're getting something from much further south, that can be a little bit dicey, can it, Josh?
Yeah, that's true. You always want to pay attention to where your tree comes from. A lot of our trees that we have in central Kentucky, they do come from Tennessee. That's just the way that the nursery industry works. Everything seems to go north. So, Tennessee has similar climate as us. Some of the independent retail garden centers do buy from our nurseries. You just want to try to buy something that that's been grown near our climate. Some of the bigger box stores, when they buy stuff, those things are coming out of Florida. And well, even though it says it's hardy in our zone, well, that thing's been babying and it's been grown in a warm temperature. It's not going to do so well in our winters that we have here.
So we had a question that I think you'll be able to answer, as where do the quality of the trees we get from KDF fall? So the KDF nursery, if you aren't familiar with it, those of you watching, fantastic resource. They sell bare root seedlings very inexpensively from seed that's collected locally. For most of it's collected right here in Kentucky, and then they are planted and grown in the nursery, also right here in Kentucky. Now those seedlings are smaller. They're not going to be those large trees that we showed in this video. They're going to be very small. Fantastic for kind of reforestation. Honestly, great even for your home, although I think there's a minimum number that you've got to order. So it might not kind of be as good of a fit for what you're looking for if you're just looking for one tree. but those are small. So they're going to require more time and more effort. And I'll let Josh speak to kind of what goes into getting a tree from that stage to the nice big, maybe 2-inch caliper trees that you buy from the nursery. There's pros and cons to both of them. And because those bare root seedlings, they don't come with a lot of soil, so they're going to be light, they're going to be easy to carry around. The root systems are intact and very good, but they're likely to dry out really fast. So if you get them, you've got to keep them moist. Otherwise, if those roots dry out, those trees are not going to do well. And they're a great option for just getting a lot of trees in the ground inexpensively. But Josh, what goes into that to what those retail centers would sell?
Well, it's a lot of work. When you start with something small, you know, a nursery does the same thing. They start with something small like that, what we refer to as a liner, which is just a simple bare root tree, which is essentially what you're getting from KDF. One of the major things that you're going to have to do with it is you got to keep the weeds out from around it. That way the weeds don't compete for nutrients and don't overshadow the tree. Second of all, you're going to have to spend a lot of time with that tree a couple times during the year, pruning out bad branches, straightening up the leaders, getting rid of cross branches. And then also, you know, you might have to stake it at some point because the leader might need a little bit of help, or that tree just won't be strong enough to handle what's called in the industry the head, which is all the branches, and it may cause the tree to fall over and go sideways because that trunk just isn't strong enough to handle it. I think it's a great resource. I think it's a lot of things to do. Just you need to be aware of what you're getting into, which is fine. And you can find all kinds of resources on our horticulture website, even on Forestry, about pruning a tree. And that's just the simple things that you want to look for that you can make that into a really, really good tree.
And I would say real quick on that, currently the Kentucky Division of Forestry is accepting orders for seedlings right now. So if that's something you're wanting, please get in there and do that quickly. And we'll try to drop a link into the chat pod here in a few minutes for you for that. They're on a kind of first come, first serve basis. So if that's a route you want to go, you might want to jump on that one pretty quick.
And just a great option, especially if you want to get a lot of trees in the ground. We did have a question about invasive trees and why nurseries are selling them. And, you know, I think they're selling them because people buy them. People buy those species, and many of them can be propagated well in the nursery setting. They might have certain characteristics that people look for: fast growth, flowers, tolerance of different environments. They're cheap and easy in a lot of cases. But, you know, and I think that from my perspective, I'd really like to change people's mindsets on what kind of trees they want to buy. Do they want to buy those trees, or do they want to buy something that's native, that's not only going to give them beauty for years to come, but also support our insects and our wildlife? And I think changing that recognition and that mindset is key. Now, different states are different. In some states, they have, you know, expansive lists of the trees that you can and can't sell. And that's not the case here. So it's really about those individuals' choices. And from my perspective, I think that more than the nurseries, it's those individuals who are making those calls. But Josh, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, and you know, you alluded to that too. But in the end, you know, the nursery is in it to make money. I mean, it's a business, and you know, we grow. Our industry grows what people are willing to buy. No, I can tell you, we're not growing Bradford pear anymore. That's done. I think one of the last nurseries, I think they grubbed 10 is all they had left. But the thing about it is that we have to sell stuff that people are willing to buy. Now our nurseries are getting better and better about growing invasive species. And you know, we grow some stuff that aren't native but aren't known to be invasive as well, because you know, there's just a need for it in landscape. You know, you only have so many flower ornamental trees that we have to use. And these other things are good for bees too, but you know, it is a problem and it is being recognized. And I think in the end, I think that extension, you know, we all need to do a better job of educating the public. You know, I still hear it all the time. These ladies or people's like, I want a burning bush. And I'm like, why? They're like, oh, the fall color is great. And I was like, well, that thing's invasive and it causes all kinds of problems. And it's just like the Bradford pear, which is one of the biggest problems we have with. People want that early flowering color. What they don't understand is, like Ellen talked about, was the seed. Birds spread it all the way around. We're getting better with that. We just have to pick and choose our battles where we go. We started with the Bradford pear. Things are working better, and eventually the burning bush will start going, and we'll get better and better.
Yeah, he followed that question up with, what can we do to educate people about it? And I think that's really one thing we're trying to do with this show right now is try to do that education and trying to get the word out. But we need others telling folks about this, so I'll encourage our audience out there to help spread the word about this show and what we're trying to do here. And what I would think largely is most of these people are not seeking out an invasive plant that's going to cause harm. They're just looking for a pretty plant that kind of fits. So, finding good alternatives is maybe a good way to do that. But help us educate the public out there, because I think generally people want to do the right thing and they don't want to cause harm to the environment. They're just unaware that is a risk that when they plant these invasive plants, they're doing.
And we are getting better about trialing stuff too before we release it to the industry. A lot of things, if we find a new cultivar, we find a new tree, we're taking in, we're trialing them for a long time to see what happens. That way we don't have issues like kudzu again or like Bradford pear that we're having problems with now. So we are getting better. It's just a learning curve. Everybody in the beginning is like, oh, look at all these cool plants that we have. And the Bradford pear, it grows really, really fast and gives us a shade tree. What we didn't realize is what happens on the backside.
Well, speaking of that, Ellen has done something on new tree care, which actually would help with that. So Ellen, do you want to go ahead and talk about your new tree care presentation?
Sure. So we talked about, how to pick your perfect tree, but what we didn't mention is what to do once you get it in the ground. So I just wanted to give you a couple pointers because I know that a lot of folks, it's tree week and fall is a fantastic time in general for planting trees. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's like spring is when you have to plant trees, but really fall's a great time, especially once it starts raining a little bit more. It's a good time to plant a tree. So I wanted to put together just some short bit of information on what do you do once you plant a tree. So here's a newly planted tree. And really when it comes to new tree care, what I want to emphasize is you're minimizing the transplant shock and you want to help those trees recover. So anytime you're planting a tree, whether it's going to be a balled and burlap tree or a container grown tree, there's going to be some loss of roots that are involved in that. And especially with those balled and burlap trees, they dug out a part of that tree, but not a lot of the roots. So you want to minimize the shock to the tree that's involved in that. It's involved in putting them in that new site, in that new soil, and helps them recover as fast as possible. Now, trees are really resilient, so sometimes they can do that really well, but there's things that you can do to set them up for success. So one thing I'd emphasize is that you need to water a tree as needed. More frequently during hot weather, or if we're not getting a lot of rain, if we have a drought. And I want to emphasize you want to water them enough, but not too much and not too little, because watering trees too much or in the wrong way can be just as bad as not watering them at all, because tree roots really don't want to be wet all the time. Now, there are some species that are more adapted to that, but in general, they don't want to be wet all the time. They want to be soaked and then that soil stay moist but dry a little bit. And so you want to water them deeply and regularly, but not kind of every day. So it's not like you'd sprinkle your plants. Here are a few photos of some good ways to water a tree. You can get one of these tree bags that you would fill up, especially if you're not getting a lot of rain. So, exactly how much water do trees need depends. It depends on the size of the tree, the type of tree, the site that it's in. But a really rough estimate is that trees want to be receiving about 1 inch of rain a week, whether that's coming from the sky or from your hose. And if they're not getting that, especially as newly planted trees, you want to be supplementing. So you could get a bag that's specially made for this that you can fill up with water. It will kind of slowly percolate down and water that tree roots deeply and then dry, and then you can refill it. This is just a plain old hose that you can put at a trickle and put around your tree, kind of rotate it over several hours to water that tree deeply. Again, imagining it's the rain instead of just kind of sprinkling it with a watering can or just sprinkling it with your hose and then being done. And this is a soaker hose. Now, when I Google how do you water a tree, what I get are a lot of images like these, someone with a watering can or someone with a hose just kind of spraying. And really that's not what you want to be doing. You want to do kind of a deep watering. Another great thing you can do for your tree is to mulch around, but not up to the base of the tree. And really what you're looking for is somewhere between 1 to 3 inches of mulch, maybe 2 inches deep. You don't want to mulch any deeper than that. In this picture right here, you can see what's called a volcano of mulch. It's kind of going right up to the trunk and is way higher than that soil level. The reason why that's a problem is if you do this, the roots of the tree are going to suffocate. Roots need air. You might not believe it because they're under the ground, but they're going to be struggling for that. Those roots, you know, a tree root, when you plant a tree, you want the very first root, that lateral root, to be no more than a couple inches below the soil level. And so you don't want it deep, deep underground. Trees aren't like tomato plants. If you do that, they're not going to set out new successful roots. Instead, they're going to set out these girdling roots that can really be a problem in the long term. Also, you don't want to pile mulch around the trunk because the trunk is not meant to be underground. And if you do that, it's going to be a perfect entry point for decay fungi and other problems that could actually rot that trunk. So the opposite of what you want. If you see these mulch volcanoes, you can change them and help your tree for sure. So none of those. What you want is a nice, shallow, but wide mulch ring. How wide? In general, the advice is that you want to mulch out to at least the drip line. So think about the canopy of the tree where water would drip down from it. You want to mulch all the way out to that. But any mulching that you can do, as long as it's well done, will be beneficial because it's going to be protecting the tree from mower damage. It's going to be helping to build that soil if you're using an organic mulch, and also kind of creating that right habitat for those roots. So you want to consider structural pruning if needed. So that's what Josh was talking about. Long-term, you want to have a central leader and you want your tree growing up and straight and maybe not all out and around. But don't do that right away. Wait for your tree's root system to establish because again, it's going through that transplant shock, and give it a couple years before you start doing any significant pruning. But structural pruning can make a big difference. It can, you know, take you from the same starting tree to a tree that's going to look really beautiful and kind of fit what you want, have good air circulation, to something that's not. So something worth considering. A lot of people ask about staking. Staking is not usually necessary for trees. Now, there are some exceptions to that depending on the type of tree you have. So if you have a very large bare root seedling, you may need to stake that, or you know, it depends. But most of the time, if you're using a balled and burlap tree or a container grown tree, it might not be necessary. But I would say that a lot of times what I will see is problems from staking. So people leave the different staking materials on there too long and can actually damage the tree. So that's something to consider. If you are staking your tree, make sure you monitor that and you really don't leave it on for more than a year. You want to take that off before it starts to interfere with that tree. And then one final note, I've read online people talking about fertilizing new trees. Fertilizer is generally not recommended for new trees. Your trees don't really need it, and sometimes it can spur the tree to put on a lot of new foliar growth when what they really need to be doing is establishing their root system in that site so they can thrive. You can't really feed a tree. They make their own food from sunlight. So fertilizer is not something that's generally recommended for newly planted trees. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and see if there are any questions.
Yes, you have several. Someone wants to know, if you're using a soaker hose, then how do you know how much water you've given your tree?
That's a good question. And I think some of them will come with amounts, but yeah, I think with that, you're gonna have to eyeball it unless anybody has a better way of doing that. You could always put it in a bucket and see what happens.
Right.
You know, time it and see.
like we used to do with like spray nozzles, calibrate them,
Yeah.
make sure you know how much you're getting. So, you know, turn it on and put it in a bucket for, you know, so long and see how much water that gives you is probably most accurate.
And are there any trees you should not mulch? Oh,
That's a good question. I can't think of any. Josh, anyone else? So I would say there's a lot of different types of mulch. And how essential that mulching is can vary. So mulching is beneficial for a number of reasons. First off, it's going to protect your tree from mower damage, which I say is like the number one problem that I see is weed whackers and mowers dinging the base of trees, and that will nick up the trees, and those are perfect entry points for fungi that can decay that wood. Now, the other thing I would say is that it helps to build the site around there. You know, you want something that's going to be conducive to trees. Trees, for example, trees and grass don't really mix, right? So while it might look beautiful to have grass around the base of your tree, that's not a natural thing that you'd ever see. If you think about how trees grow in the woods, they're always going to be naturally mulched by leaves and other materials, but they don't have, you know, this really dense layer of mulch that people tend to put on around their trees. So it might look a little different and not be as visually appealing. So I see we've got some comments on that. Josh, do you have thoughts on that as well?
You know, like you said, the mulch keeps mowers and weed eaters away, and that's like probably one of the number one things. And then on top of that, the mulch also helps retain moisture in the soil from keeps it from evaporating, and it also, you know, helps feed the trees. As that mulch breaks down, it's doing a good job feeding those microorganisms that are essentially taking it and breaking it down to nutrients that the tree does need and the soil does need. So yeah, I really can't think of anything that doesn't need to be mulched. I see Bethany put something about fruit trees. Yeah, I agree with that. Keeping dirt around the fruit trees would be great to keep the voles from eating the bark on the fruit trees. Because you're
Someone
trying to
said cypress as well. Is that?
You know, cypress is one of those funny trees. It can be grown high and dry, and then it won't get cypress knees. And then cypress could also be grown in a wet environment where it will get the cypress knees. It'll take a while for the cypress knees to come on, even in a wet environment. So even then, I would still mulch around it until the cypress knees started developing. But even then, I've seen it on UK's campus down by where the student center is. There is some big cypress trees down there. The knees came up, and they still ran them over with a lawnmower. So they mulched around it to protect from mower damage.
And I would say with your fruit trees, if you're not going to mulch those, you're going to have some way to exclude competing vegetation that's going to be right around the base. So that'll continue to be the case so that you don't ding them up with a mower.
You know, one of our other county agents, and you know, I love this, the county agents are really helping out here, mentioned a flow meter that you can get for your garden hose, and it was only like $17, he said. So thanks, Brandon, for pointing that out. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. That way you don't have to do the bucket test.
You're right.
We're not very civilized with our bucket test here, Billy.
Awesome.
Well, it looks like we've answered all the questions on that.
Yeah, both of you all, thank you so much. The video earlier was great, you know, and Ellen, your presentation, really what a fitting topic that you all covered really outstandingly today for Tree Week. Thank you so much. Oh.
No problem.
Well, happy Tree Week, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks much.
Go buy trees.
Yeah, go trees, yes. Awesome.
All right, so Tree Week and Tree of the Week.
Yes, indeed. You know, and now the Tree of the Week was alluded to in the video, and we have Laurie Thomas, who does our weekly Tree of the Week segment. And Laurie, how are you this morning?
Doing great, doing great. Yeah, so happy Tree Week. I got to do the first program for ours on tree identification on Monday. And so we've got some great other ones. I know Dr. Crocker and Megan did some really great forest health, tree health ones yesterday. And then check out, like Dr. Crocker said, check out Matt's as well. But this week I've chosen the Tree of the Week as Lexington's official tree, and it's the bur oak. So off you go.
All right. All right. I'm going to stop my video and I'll pull up her presentation.
I'm Laurie Thomas with the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resources Extension, and I'm here with the Tree of the Week, the bur oak. Bur oak, Quercus macrocarpa, is a widespread oak that is a member of the white oak group. It is also known as blue oak, mossy cup oak, mossy overcup oak, and scrub oak. Bur oak is one of the most cold-tolerant of the North American oak species. This stately tree is considered a medium-sized to large tree that typically grows 70 to 90 feet tall, but is often found as tall as 100 feet and 3 to 4 feet in diameter with a large spreading crown. It is a relatively slow-growing but long-lived tree that commonly lives 200 to 300 years, if not longer. It is considered intermediate in shade tolerance. Bur oak is commonly used in shelter belt plantings and as a shade tree in large landscapes, as it is considered tolerant of urban pollution. Bur oak has one of the largest natural ranges of oaks in North America and ranges the farthest north. It's found growing in a wide variety of sites, including dry uplands, sandy plains, prairie grasslands, and fertile limestone soils and moist bottomlands. It typically grows in a mixture with other hardwoods, and in the west it's a pioneer tree in prairie grasslands. However, bur oak savannas have declined due to grazing and fire suppression. In Kentucky, bur oak grows in most parts of the state except the east and is a common sight in the bluegrass region in pastures. Bur oak is very resistant to drought due to its early taproot development and extensive root system. Bur oak is deciduous with alternately arranged leaves. The leaves are simple in form, meaning they're made up of one blade and usually between 6 to 12 inches long. The leaves are somewhat obovate and kind of fiddle-shaped with the leaf tapering to a wedge at the base. The leaves have numerous lobes, a few with sinuses, those are the indentations, that reach almost to the midrib of the leaf. Many times the lobes near the tip of the leaf resemble a crown. They are green above and pale and fuzzy below, and fall color is typically dull yellow to brown. Bur oak is monoecious, meaning a tree will have both male and female flowers. The male flowers are yellow-green and in drooping catkins that are usually about 2 to 4 inches long. The female flowers are greenish with a red tint and appear in a single short spikes. Both flowers emerge after the leaves in the spring, and they are wind-pollinated. The fruit of bur oak is an acorn. In fact, bur oak has the largest acorns of any native oak. The acorns are 3/4 to 1.5 inches, with at least half of the acorn enclosed in a warty cap that is conspicuously fringed. The acorns ripen in one growing season and mature in later summer into the fall. Seeds are dispersed by gravity, wildlife squirrels, and to a limited extent by water, and what acorns that are not eaten by a variety of wildlife will germinate soon after dropping. Bur oak begins seed production around 35 years of age and can continue to produce acorns several hundred years. However, optimal seed production is between 75 to 150 years. Trees produce good seed crops every 2 to 3 years. Bur oak, like most oaks, is an important wildlife tree. The acorns are consumed by birds and mammals, including squirrels, rabbits, ground squirrels, mice, deer, and possibly wood duck and blue jays. The foliage is eaten by deer and cattle, and red-tailed hawks, screech owls, fox squirrels, and flying squirrels nest in the large canopies. The bark of bur oak is very thick. It's ashy gray to brown in color and quite scaly, but has noticeable vertical ridges on large trees. The branches often have corky ridges all the way out to the end of the branch. Bur oak wood is light to medium brown in color, though there can be a fair amount of variation in color. It has medium to large pores and a fairly coarse grain. It's ring porous with an abundance of tyloses, which are balloon-like outgrowths of parenchyma cells which block water movement in the vessels. The presence of tyloses in white oaks makes their wood watertight, which is why it's preferred in casks and shipbuilding to red oak, and the growth rings are distinct. Bur oak has been rated as having very good resistance to decay. Bur oak falls into the white oak group and shares many of the same traits as white oak Quercus alba. The wood is used for cabinetry, furniture, interior trim, flooring, boat building, barrels, and veneer. The trees are also used in shelter belt plantings in the Midwest, and it's used in large urban landscapes as a shade tree due to its tolerance to pollution. There are 2 national champions. One is in Mason, West Virginia. It's 278 inches in circumference, 108 feet tall, with a 112-foot crown spread. The co-champion is in Boone, Missouri, and it's 295 inches in circumference, 74 feet tall, with a 129-foot crown spread. The Kentucky champion is in Woodford County. It is 304 inches in circumference, 92 feet tall, with a 101-foot crown spread. A local arborist estimated the tree to be between 400 and 500 years old. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, check out American Forest National Register of Champion Trees, or check out the Kentucky Champion Tree with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. Now for a few fun facts about bur oak. Bur oak is named for the characteristic fringed acorn cap because it resembles the burr of a chestnut tree. The massive root system of the bur oak is said to be a mirror reflection of the trunk and branch system above ground. The bur oak is the official tree of Lexington, Kentucky. It's also the state tree of Iowa. The large sweet acorns have long been eaten by humans. The scientific genus name Quercus is Latin for oak, and the species name Macrocarpa is from the Greek makros, which means large, and karpos, which means fruit, referring to the large acorns. Thank you for joining me to learn about the bur oak. I hope you get the opportunity to get out into your woodland, a local park, or your neighborhood and enjoy this outstanding and beautiful bur oak.
Well, Lori, thank you so much for that presentation. We greatly appreciate you doing these every week, and it was very interesting. I really enjoyed that. And there, if anyone has questions, they can put them in the chat pod. But I did have one question. You mentioned that it was the local Lexington tree. So
Yes.
where can I actually go see one of these?
Well, you can see them in a lot of places around Lexington, but a great place that you can get up close and personal to one is at McConnell Springs Park. It's one of the city's natural areas parks. So if you all ever make it in, you're into campus for a meeting or something, take a minute. McConnell Springs Park is just off of Old Frankfort Pike, so it's pretty close to campus, and take a little walk to see the historic bur oak. It's estimated that that tree, we don't really know because it's hollow, how big that tree, how old that tree is, but they estimated that it was probably started growth in the late 1600s, early 1700s. So it's an old tree.
Wow.
Go take a look and you can get up close and personal with it.
That's really cool that trees can live that long, and we've got some right here, some great examples of it. And I want to say that tree that was in Woodford County was prettier than the other national champion trees. So,
It is, yeah, and that's actually on one of the local horse farms there, so it's on private property, but yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah, beautiful tree. Thank you, Laurie. Those segments are amazing. You do such a great job with those. I really appreciate it very much.
And
Happy Tree Week.
bye.
Yeah. And speaking of trees, one of the things we love about trees not only is the great shade they provide and the flowers and the fruit, but they also get a lot of wood products, and a lot of other forest products really come from our trees. And we have Mr. Chad Nyman on. Chad works with us here in the department, and he works in that kind of primary area, working with our, our sawmills and our loggers and those people that really turn those trees into some beautiful products.
Thank you for that introduction, Billy. I love those tree week segments, and the bur oak's such a majestic tree. You all might have heard it's tree week this week, so we want to celebrate that and continue that excitement. We definitely want to encourage you to participate in raising the awareness of Forest Products Week, which is going to be next week. And so that's always the third week in October. This year it's going to be the 18th through the 24th. And so we celebrate those products, those foods, those services like clean air and clean water, wildlife habitat, and those products, everything from our homes that we live in to the cabinets we store stuff in, the table we gather around with our family and friends, all of those wonderful products and jobs that are created from those forests. And so we've got a wonderful infographic. We're not going to have any fun activities like are going on for Tree Week this year. But I do want everyone to help to share the information about Forest Products Week. And so we've got a great infographic that we want to make available for folks. We'll be sharing information like this during Forest Products Week on our social media pages. But just wanted to spend a little bit of time to give more reasons to care about and appreciate trees and keep some of this excitement going for Tree Week. But thank you, Billy, for giving me some time to talk about Forest Products Week next week.
And I think, Chad, you'll be on a little bit next week to kind of give us a little more information about what Forest Products Week is. And I know with COVID going on, normally you have tours and you show tables that have been made at the UK and different events going on. And so I hate that we can't actually do that this year, but maybe next year we can get back on the Forest Product Trail.
Definitely. Hopefully next year.
Yeah.
I think we've been saying that a lot this year.
Yeah. 2020 just keeps going and going and going. No, but Chad, thank you for that. I mean, I think you've been over the last few years really trying to raise the awareness of the importance of our forest products and through this Forest Products Week celebration. So I appreciate your efforts in that regard.
Thank you, Billy.
All right, Renee, another great show, another great group of guests, and what a way to celebrate Tree Week this week with a great Tree Week.
I told you it was packed and tree. So and I think that promise was fulfilled.
Excellent. All right. Well, folks, we appreciate you all being with us every week. We encourage you to join us next week as well at 11 o'clock, and we'll keep the fun going, all about trees and forestry and wildlife here in the state of Kentucky and the region. As always, Renee, we encourage people to visit us online at fromthewoodstoday.com. Like us on Facebook, and please help us spread the word about this program. We think there's a lot of individuals out there that would enjoy this and get some good content that they could apply to their own settings. Again, thank you. And Renee, thanks for your leadership on this effort. It's a lot of fun to be part of From the Woods Today.
Definitely. And, fromthewoodstoday.com, like you said, shows we have every video that we have ever had over there. And I think next week, you're going to do quite a few next week. And you want to talk about the maple syrup a little bit?
Yeah, real quick, I'll just kind of preview it. There's a big group here, or a growing group here in Kentucky that is really working hard to develop a maple syrup industry. And we have a group, the Kentucky Maple Syrup Producers Association, and we are actually doing some celebrations with them. And coming up on November 7th, we're going to have a virtual Kentucky Maple School. So we'll be plugging that next week, and that registration stuff will soon be available. It'll be via Zoom, unfortunately, but that's the best we can do during this time. But please tune in next week, and we're going to have representatives from the Kentucky Maple Syrup Association, as well as some of our county extension agents that have been heavily involved in that effort. One of the things I really love about this effort, Renee, is it really came from the ground up, from local producers and local county extension agents, identifying an issue and an opportunity, and then bringing in partners to kind of address it. So our department here at UK Forestry and Natural Resources Extension is heavily involved in trying to support that group, and we received a few grants, and we'll be talking about that to try to help that effort. But tune in next week, especially if you got a sweet tooth.
Exactly.
And maple syrup is an amazing product, and we'll learn more about that next week.
Yeah, it's interesting how you go from a tree and tap something and make it on your table and in your pancakes. So
we'll talk about that whole process and how people can get involved and learn more about it. And even if you're not a landowner that's going to be producing it, we need more consumers of Kentucky maple syrup. So check that out as well.
So make sure to tune in next week at 11 o'clock. It's every Wednesday at 11. We have new show topics, and we have them lined up for you all. Everything from Halloween stuff to Christmas stuff. So we're actually already working on things like that. So make sure you stay tuned in with us every Wednesday at 11 o'clock on Facebook Live or on Zoom. You can go to From the Woods Today and click on our Watch Live button, and you can find out there. But until then, you all take care, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good week. See you next week.